Have you ever sat at the edge of your bed in the quiet of morning and thought, when did silence start feeling so heavy? There's a difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is when you choose the quiet, when peace settles into your bones, and you're glad for the stillness. But loneliness is when the silence feels like it was left behind by someone who didn't stay, or by voices that have faded over the years. Children, friends, even partners. It's not just absence, it's the ache that lingers in its place. And after 60, that ache can show up in unexpected ways, in the long spaces between phone calls, in holidays that feel quieter than they used to, in the feeling that the world is moving faster, louder, and somehow farther away from you. You may still smile. You may still go about your day. But inside, there's a small voice asking, do they still see me? Do I still matter? If you've ever felt that, please know this. You are not alone. And more importantly, you are not broken. What you are is human. Loneliness isn't a flaw in your character. It's not proof that something is wrong with you. It's simply a signal, a whisper from within saying, come back. There's something inside you that still needs tending. That's what this conversation is about. Not about fixing loneliness like it's a problem to be solved, but about healing it like it's a wound that deserves care. Helen is 72. Her husband passed away 8 years ago. Her children live in different cities. And while they call often enough, the calls are short, polite, full of schedules and surface updates. Not the kind of calls that leave you feeling full, just touched base. She volunteers at a nearby hospital, goes to church on Sundays, tends to her little garden with patience. But every now and then, she walks into the living room, looks at the photos on the wall, and feels like the house is a museum of her own life filled with memories. But no one walking through. One morning, she sat with a cup of tea and made herself a promise. If I can't fill the room with people, I will learn to fill it with peace. That promise became a turning point. She didn't know exactly how to do it, but she started small. Each morning, before checking the weather or turning on the news, she sat in stillness for 10 minutes, just breathing, not doing anything, just being. At first, it was hard. Her mind raced, but slowly, the silence softened. It no longer shouted, "You're alone." It began to whisper, "You're here." And that's enough. That was her first quiet practice, intentional stillness, not silence filled with loneliness, but silence filled with presence. Then came the second. Frank is 68, divorced, retired. His daughter visits every few weeks, but he doesn't like to ask for more. He doesn't want to seem needy, so he spends a lot of time alone. He fills his hours with TV, crossword puzzles, and long walks that feel a little emptier each week. One day, he found a box of old records in the attic, jazz albums, mostly things he hadn't touched since the early 80s. He pulled out an old player, wiped off the dust, and let the music play, and something stirred. Memories. Yes, but more than that connection, not to people, to himself. He realized, I forgot what makes me feel alive. That was his second practice. Reconnection through creativity, not performance, not productivity, just doing something that wakes the soul, something that says, I'm still here. I still have beauty to make. It's not about being useful to others anymore. It's about being meaningful to yourself. That's a truth many people don't talk about when it comes to aging, that we've spent so long being useful to everyone else, raising kids, running homes, managing crises, that we've forgotten how to simply enjoy ourselves without needing to be needed. But your soul doesn't ask for usefulness. It asks for presence, for color, for breath, for meaning. And so we begin to return to small rituals that honor our own existence, not for anyone else, but for us. Grace, 75, has lived alone since her sister passed. They used to talk every night before bed. Now, the evenings feel long, but instead of filling them with television, she began writing 1 letter a day, not to send, just to write. Some letters are to people she misses. Some are to herself. Some are to God. She said, "It makes me feel like I'm still in conversation with life. That's the third practice. Emotional expression without waiting for permission. You don't need someone to listen in order to speak. You don't need someone to reply in order to express your truth. Your thoughts, your grief, your joy, all of it is still worthy of air, of ink, of form. These aren't just habits. They are acts of reclaiming your sense of self from the quiet, reclaiming your place in a world that too often forgets the treasure of lived wisdom. And even when the phone doesn't ring, even when the calendar looks a little too blank, these practices become companions, gentle ones, honest ones. They say, you may be alone today, but you are not without meaning. You are not without beauty, and you are never, ever truly alone inside yourself. There's a moment that sneaks up on many of us, often in the middle of a seemingly ordinary day, when we pause and realize we've been waiting for someone to call, someone to visit, someone to remind us that we still matter. And when they don't, or when they do, but with half a heart, that waiting starts to feel like something heavier, like proof that we've been left behind. But here's the truth. What you're feeling isn't failure. It isn't weakness. It's the body and the heart reminding you that connection matters. But the first connection that must be rebuilt is the one you have with yourself. Because sometimes loneliness isn't just about the absence of others. It's about the absence of you in your own life. Frank didn't see it right away. He filled his days with distractions, television, errands, meals eaten without attention. But somewhere in the middle of his routines, he realized that even when he was busy, he felt empty. That's when it hit him. He hadn't really shown up for himself in years. His thoughts ran on autopilot. His days blurred. And that subtle sadness he carried wasn't about others not being there. It was about him not being there for himself. So he made a shift, a small one. Each morning before his coffee, he stood by the window and asked, "Frank, how are you doing today?" Not out loud, just in thought. And whatever came up, loneliness, peace, regret, he let it land. No judgment, just noticing. This became his fourth quiet practice. Emotional check-ins with the self. Because so often, we run from our feelings as if there's something dangerous. But they're not. They're just visitors, messages. And the more we acknowledge them, the less power they hold over us. Helen, whose days once felt like echoes of what used to be, began to try this too. She'd sit with her tea, put one hand on her chest, and just breathe. Not to fix anything, just to listen. Some days she cried. Some days she laughed at the memory that surfaced. But more often than not, she found that her own company was softer than she thought, less frightening, even comforting. That's what starts to happen when you stop fearing your own presence and start embracing it. Because you are not broken just because you feel deeply. You are not weak because you long for connection. And you are not behind because your days are quiet. You are still whole, still worthy of tending, still becoming. Margaret, 70, used to dread the late afternoon hours. That stretch of time when the sun begins to fall and the day starts to quiet, what some people call the lonely hour. She'd wander the house, pick things up just to set them down again, flip through the television channels without really watching. One day, she tried something new. Instead of trying to escape the loneliness, she decided to sit with it. She made a small ritual of it, lighting a candle, putting on soft instrumental music, and reading a page from a book that made her feel hopeful. Just one page. That was enough. What surprised her most wasn't that the loneliness went away. It didn't. Not entirely, but that it stopped feeling so sharp. It softened. That became her fifth practice, turning empty time into sacred time. Because when you give shape to the silence, it stops echoing with sadness. It begins to hold presence, intention, even a kind of beauty. That's the shift we're making together, not pushing the loneliness away, but befriending it, inviting it to speak, letting it teach us not what's missing, but what matters most now. And sometimes, what matters is simply having something to look forward to. Ethan, who rarely left his house after his wife passed, found himself walking the same streets every morning, same loop, same pace, same silent return, until one day, he He stopped in front of a small flower shop he'd never really noticed before. Something in the window caught his eye. A bouquet of sunflowers. Vibrant, bold, alive. He didn't go in that day, but the next day, he did. He bought one single sunflower, put it in a glass on the windowsill, and from then on, every Tuesday, he walked to that shop, just to see what was new, just to feel color again. That became his 6th quiet practice, seeking small beauty with intention, because peace isn't always grand. Sometimes it's just one bright thing in a quiet room, one choice that reminds you that joy is still available. And over time, these small practices don't just fill your days, they begin to stitch something back together inside you. A trust, a tenderness, a relationship with yourself that says, even if no one else shows up today, I will. And when you begin showing up for yourself like that, something changes in the way the world sees you. 2, you begin to radiate something different. Not desperation, not sadness, but presence. And presence is magnetic. People feel it. They're drawn to it not because you chase them, but because you stopped chasing anything and started rooting yourself. You are not broken because you feel lonely. You are not failing at life because some days are too quiet. You are simply alive. And being alive means feeling, it means grieving, hoping, resting, waking, wondering, it means learning. Even now, that peace doesn't come from outside the door. It begins inside the heart. When you begin to treat your own company as worthy, something shifts. The silence that once felt like an absence begins to feel like a sanctuary. The routines that once dragged now feel like rituals. And most of all, you begin to see yourself not as someone waiting for others to arrive, but as someone who has arrived. That's the moment when loneliness begins to lose its grip, not because people suddenly appear, but because you've returned to yourself. Frank noticed this shift one afternoon as he poured himself a cup of coffee. Nothing had changed externally. His son hadn't called. The house was still quiet, but he realized that for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the hollow ache in his chest. He sipped slowly. He looked out the window, and he thought to himself, this is enough right now. I am enough. It wasn't joy, exactly. It was something quieter, a calmness, a steadiness. That's what inner peace often looks like. After 60, it doesn't arrive with a banner and music. It comes in the form of mornings that don't sting, afternoons that hold you gently, evenings that no longer feel like reminders of what's missing, but invitations into what's here. Helen felt it, too. The more she honored her own rhythms, her tea, her journaling, her quiet painting, the more she began to feel herself returning. Not the version of her that had to be everything for everyone. Not the busy, apologetic woman always trying to make the most of her time. But the woman who simply allowed herself to be, and when her daughter came to visit after 3 months apart, something subtle changed in the air. Her daughter paused before speaking, asked questions instead of giving instructions, looked at her mother, not just as mom, but as a person, a presence. That's what happens when you embody peace. Others can feel it. Even if they don't understand why, your energy no longer vibrates with longing. It radiates with self-possession, not arrogance, not distance, just enoughness. You stop pulling people in, and yet they start leaning closer. Because something about a person who is content in their own skin draws others near, not because they need to, but because they want to. Margaret, who once dreaded the weekends, now fills them with small adventures. She still lives alone, still misses her sister deeply, but she no longer waits for someone to call and fill the day. She chooses where her feet will go. A local garden, a new bookshop, the market just 2 neighborhoods over. She takes a small notebook wherever she goes, not for to-do lists, but for wonder. She writes down anything that makes her smile. Yesterday, I saw a boy give an old woman a flower at the bus stop. They didn't speak the same language, but she beamed. Moments like that don't just pass through you when you're present. They nourish you. They become part of the peace you're building. And when her nephew visited from out of town, he noticed the difference. You seem brighter, he said, surprised. I've started giving my attention to things that feed me. she replied, gently, even when no one else is around. That kind of answer stays with people, not because it demands anything, but because it shows them another way is possible. And that's the quiet power of this path. You're not just healing yourself. You're becoming a silent teacher of resilience, a living example of what it looks like to be okay, even when things are not perfect, even when life has changed, even when others don't show up the way you wish they would. Grace, now 76, said something beautiful during a late afternoon walk with a friend. Peace, for me, is no longer about being surrounded. It's about no longer needing to be filled. That's what this journey leads to. Not isolation, not giving up, but a shift in center from needing to be filled by others to filling from within. And the result, your relationships begin to shift. And to do, not because you push anyone away, but because you no longer lean forward begging to be seen. You sit back in your own seat. You let others come to you, if and when they're ready. And when they do, they'll find someone stronger, softer, more whole, someone who is no longer broken by silence, but shaped by it. Someone who doesn't crumble in the face of being alone, but expands in it. Because being alone does not mean being unloved. Being alone does not mean being unworthy. Being alone simply means that, for now, your own voice is the one guiding you home. And that voice, it's always been there, buried under years of caretaking, people-pleasing, and waiting. But now it's time to let it speak, to let it choose the music in the morning, to let it decide when to rest and when to rise, to let it laugh, even if no one is in the room, because that voice is you, still here, still wise, still deserving of joy not someday, but now. And that's what living the change means. Not waiting for life to fix itself, but stepping forward into your own light even if the room is still quiet. Especially then, because your peace was never meant to come from how many people are around you. It was always waiting inside you, just quietly asking to be heard. If you've made it here, I want to thank you from one heart to another, because it takes a special kind of strength to sit with feelings that aren't always easy, to reflect, not rush, to face the stillness without looking away. Loneliness is a quiet ache. It doesn't scream. It doesn't storm. It just waits at the corners of the day, in the pauses between laughter, in the empty chairs at the table. But you didn't run from it today. You showed up, you listened, and more importantly, you allowed yourself to remember that just because you're walking a quiet path doesn't mean you're walking it alone. I hope this time together reminded you of something you may have forgotten, that you are not your isolation. You are not your empty rooms. You are not your unanswered calls or the calendar with too much space between visits. You are still here, still radiant, still whole, even when the world goes silent. And if anything I said today made you feel a little less invisible, a little more steady, I'd love to hear from you. Have you felt loneliness take root in your life after 60? What small practices have brought you peace, or which ones are you willing to try now? I invite you, gently, to share your thoughts in the comments, even if it's just a few words, because your story might be the exact reminder someone else needs to keep going. And in a world that moves too fast, spaces like this where we pause together are sacred. This isn't about offering solutions. It's about offering presence. You're not here to be fixed. You're here to be honored. And if this video gave you something comfort, courage, or just a breath of stillness, I'd be grateful if you stayed with us on this journey. Click subscribe if your heart says yes. Not because you have to, not because it's expected, but because this space was made for people like you. People who still believe that life after 60 can be deep, meaningful, and quietly beautiful. Here, we don't chase youth. We embrace becoming. Here, we don't count losses. We count the wisdom gathered through them. And here, we don't pretend the path is easy, but we walk it together with softness, with honesty, and with a hand gently held out toward those who need it. If no one has told you lately, let me tell you now, you are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late for peace. You are still a light, maybe softer now, maybe steadier but no less bright. Your joy matters. Your quiet matters. Your existence matters. And in this season of life, the world may grow louder, but that doesn't mean you need to. You can be still. You can be slow and still be powerful. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is simply choose not to disappear. So keep showing up. For your morning cup of tea, for your soft music and your walks with no destination, for your letters you write but don't send, for the books you finally read and the memories you honor with a gentle smile. These things, they count. They build a life, a real one. And if you ever feel yourself forgetting again, come back here. I'll be waiting. This space will be waiting. And the version of you who felt seen today, she'll still be waiting too. Until then, take gentle care of your spirit. You don't have to fill the silence. You only have to meet it honestly, kindly, and walk with it as your companion, not your enemy. Because you, dear soul, are not broken. You are simply becoming whole in a quieter way. And I am so grateful you chose to spend this moment becoming with me. Until next time, stay soft, stay strong, and never forget, you are not alone. Not here, not now, not ever.